I've just hit the record button now. So everything I say now is on file, on record. If anybody's nervous about being recorded, please do let us know. But the reason that we're recording is because there are a number of people who really wanted to be here today, but were unable. So they've asked us if we could record and send out the recording. So as you're aware, we're going to spend 60 minutes being grilled. I'm going to introduce my wonderful panelists and co-hosts, should I say. So if you could just give me a wave when I say your name. So introducing John Harvey, Isabel Knight, Rachel Guyat.
Hello.
Hello, hello. And Robert Camp, who's just coming in with his video. Hopefully there he is, right on time.
And he's connected to audio.
Connecting to the audio.
Robert, that was perfectly timed. I've just introduced you, so if you could just give everybody a wave so they know who Robert is. Hello. There we go. I feel like I'm doing a game show online. So I'm gonna let Chris introduce his younger person, his student body, in a minute. But just so that you can understand a little bit about why we are here and why we're doing this. We had a conversation a while ago, a good few weeks back now, when we were still in the depths of lockdown. And we were talking about how difficult it must be as a young person, not knowing whether the university is going to open, not knowing whether or not your course is going to look like it was intended to look, not knowing what COVID has actually done to impact the studies that you were hoping to undertake from September. You might be looking at year one and wondering what on earth Freshers Week is going to be like, and being slightly concerned that it's not going to be quite as much fun as it would have been last year. You might be just graduating, and you might be trying to start a business and going into your young entrepreneur lives and wondering what starting a business post-lockdown might actually look like. But either way, we recognise that there were some difficulties that young people were facing. And what we thought, us oldies, was that if we allowed ourselves to be grilled so that we could share in real world language, without educational language, without the
corporate jargon.
Well, without the corporate jargon, without the formalities around it, that actually you guys might learn a lot from that if we shared our mistakes and our failings and all the things that we've taken 20, 30 years to learn, that if we shared it, we could just accelerate things for you, and that would be useful. And hopefully you're here because you've already agreed that that's the case. So I am going to shut up now and just let you know that in true Zoom style, the way that you can get involved in this session is you can post chat in the chat box, and we're going to be managing the chat box. So if you hear something that interests you and you want to go deeper with that topic, let us know. If you think we're talking rubbish, let us know, or anything else that you might want to share with us, just let us know in the chat box, and we hope that this will be as entertaining as it is informative. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. So afternoon, folks. My name is Chris. I will effectively be your MC for the session, and I'm joined by the wonderful Linus Go and Eleanor Hitchings. So as Rachel said, we're here to bring you some insight, and we've been instructed to be as savage with them as possible. I don't know whether we'll be savage, but it will hopefully be interesting. We've compiled our own collection of questions. We'll have 4 questions each, so it's a lot to get through in an hour. So it's also my job to tell everyone to shut up when we need to, and to keep the flow of things going. As Rachel said, if you've got any questions, comments, or want to call out what you believe may be some corporate BS, then do put so in the chat. And so with that in mind, let us begin the grilling. And where better to start than at the beginning of a business, entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurs are forever innovating new things, some brilliant, some not so much. And when building a new team to create something, what do you think are the foundational pillars that you simply cannot neglect, and what those look like in terms of skills in applicants? And I'd like to talk that to Rob first as the innovation man here, and then to Rachel H as well after that.
Thanks, Chris.
entrepreneurs that I come across have one thing in common, and that's passion. They have a real passion for what they want to do and what they want to achieve and what they're trying to build, whether a product or a service. So for me, what you need to do if you're starting out in business is get a team that shares your passion, shares your vision, and shares your purpose. You want people who are aligned to what you're trying to achieve. You don't want somebody who's going to come in and actually challenge in a negative way what you're trying to achieve. So yes, you'll need different skill sets, but fundamentally for me, you want the right people, as they, sorry to use corporate jargon, on the bus, but they have to really align with your passion and your belief that what you're trying to do is something special and can have an impact on the area of work that you want it to have the impact on.
All right, Rachel.
Okay, for me, there are 4 clear steps to success, whether you are an entrepreneur starting out or whether you've been in business 20 years and you want to make a change and achieve a goal. And that is the simple formula of know where I'm going, know where I am now, understand the gap and how to navigate it. Those 4 simple steps: future, present state, what's the gap, how to get there.
See, I really want to roast some more, but they're just good answers. Robert, what would you say is the secondary skill?
Okay.
Yeah, all right, Isabel.
I wanted to add something, because you asked about skills, and I think it's really important to make a distinction between you can learn skills, and when you're starting out on a business, the key thing is to have a clear vision and also to know what's important to you. So what are your values? So when you're building a team, it's actually more important to have people who are aligned with your vision and your values, and then you can build the skills in, and that's far more important. And I've worked with many companies over my time who've said, actually, we've just hired the wrong people, had the right skills, wrong values, and that will disrupt a team and will disrupt moving forward. So for me, that is one of the foundations for getting started.
John.
Yeah, following on from Isabel, culture, define your culture. Only accept people into your teams that align with your culture, which is the same as, it's linked very closely to values.
But how do you find that out? That's the ultimate question. How do you measure culture within your team and then in an applicant?
Well, you
have Isabel.
In an interview process, you mean? Actually, in the interview.
Sure. Yeah.
I think one if anybody watching this needs a tip on how to look great at an interview to align with culture, it would be what I call CAR questions, and they're sometimes called STAR questions or SOAR questions, but context, action, and outcome. Like you need to be able to describe what happened, and a good interviewer will dig below the surface of those questions. So they won't just say, what did you do and what was the outcome? They will say, get really into the detail, the nitty gritty of what did you do and why did you do it and why did you do that as opposed to this? And you can then get a real sense of somebody's values and behaviors in that.
Oh, sorry, there's just a question here. When you say values, what sort of values are you talking about?
If you don't mind, I'm happy for you to answer this, because it goes back to a comment you made, Chris, about how do you determine what your values are, and I think that for me it's a starting point, and values are not your core drivers, if you like. And I always try and explain it to people, if they cut you in half, like what is the writing of a stick of rock that would go right through you, that motivates you and gets you up in the morning, and there's different processes for doing that, and certainly if we end up running our program, that would be a core element of the program, so that it starts with individuals. So anyone on this call, if you don't know what your values are, it's to do some research around it. There's some good books around it. John Demartini, about understanding what your values are, what your drivers are. And then, as Rachel was saying, when you go into a company, every company has a way of being, if you like, and values in a company exhibit themselves in the behavior of the staff. So how people behave, what their imagery is like, if you like. And so if you're going into a company, you can look on their website, you can do some research, but you can also ask questions, as Rachel was saying, about actually how do people behave around here. A good question, actually, a good tip here is, if you're going in, if you could describe your culture in 3 words, what would that be? And that will put the interviewer on the spot and make them think about actually what is important about our culture. And then if you understand your own, you can match them together. What's important to me in finding a company with the right culture.
See, it's definitely interesting. We are going to have to move on, though, because we're on time constraints. but I think that will tie in nicely to some of the other topics we have coming up later on, so should be okay. The next thing, when it comes to entrepreneurship, you deal with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of things that you don't know the answers to yet, particularly if you're just starting off and you're still learning. How do you deal with uncertainty? John, your world has been flipped upside down, so to speak, since lockdown began. You had to acclimatize yourself to a new, strange, digital, technological world with all networking events moving online.
Yeah.
How do you plan for these inevitable kind of rare events? And how are you going to get back to normal?
Oh my God, that's a good question. I don't think you can plan for something like a pandemic. So it's, although we could have all seen it coming, to be fair, you have to be able to think clearly under pressure, which is something you can acquire. Clive Woodward did a lot of work with the England rugby team back in the day on that very subject. So great sporting people always seem to have a little bit more time than anyone else. It's an illusion, but you can. It's not to panic. A lot of it comes down to mindset. Just always be positive. And I know that is corporate bullshit, actually. Let's face it, always be positive. But I do firmly believe that good things happen to good people, and you just have to stay true to your values, to your culture. I distill it down to 2 words: be nice.
Robert, you gave a little bit of a... Sorry, go on, John.
Oh, and how do you plan to get out of it? You have to, what's another corporate cliche, everybody? Adapt or die. You've got to be prepared to change. But equally, if you try and do that on your own, like any problem, it's likely to overwhelm you. So go to the people, your go-to people in your network or in your social circle or whatever, all the people you look up to, and go, I really need your help. Because if you talk about it, most of the good ideas in my world for what I do come from the people around me.
Robert, you gave Rachel, I will come to you in a minute, I promise.
Sorry,
Robert, you gave something of a grimace when John said you simply can't plan for something like a pandemic. Do you believe you can?
Well, we'll all be trying to in the future because we've been through it, but nobody had planned. There was no rule book for what happened when the Prime Minister told us all to stay in our houses, basically. I think going back to your original question, Chris, ask for help. And it picks up a bit on the earlier question. A good team, a good leader fills the holes that they're not so good in. They recognize where they're not as good as perhaps other people, and they find better people to fill those holes. So for me personally, I'm not a numbers person, I'm a lawyer, so I knew I needed a very, very good finance director. So I went for somebody much, much better than me because I knew that would strengthen the team. But ask for help. You know,
he's good, by the way.
Rachel.
I was going to say, actually, it's actually the same as what you've just said, Robert, that if you don't have a good team around you, then in times like, you know, the times that we've just been through, you're going to struggle. And if you don't have your, you know, the people who are backing you and the people in your corner and who are going to fight with you, then any crisis, which you will always face, but any sort of issue, crisis, problem that you come across will be challenging. And so I suppose that's the one thing that I've made sure that I have is a really good team that I work with, and it's a really good sort of mentor and a sort of, you know, people in my corner who are willing to fight with me, for, you know, to get everybody through.
All right, Eleanor, are there any questions on that in the chat?
No, I don't think so.
Fabulous. Okay, well, in that case, that's my 2 questions on entrepreneurship. If we move on to the next person, Eleanor, if you'd like to take your first topic, grill away.
Okay, so I'm going to be asking a couple of questions now about competition. So I know you've spoken a lot about kind of having good values and finding a good company with good values, but has it always been that way? Has there been a time where you've had to compromise your own morals to get ahead in the business world? That's for anyone.
I'll go with that first. I think firstly, a little misapprehension on what values are, because values can be very different to each person. And so actually you find the right values for you as a person. And that then answers your second question. So yes, in my law career, I have stood up and said, I'm not going to cross a line on more than one occasion. And I have turned away very financially viable clients to the business because I was not prepared to do what they were asking me to do, because that went down to my own personal values. Now, there will be other firms that would say, no, eat what you kill, everything goes, and that will be okay for some other people, but not for me. So values are not nice, fluffy things. They're actually can be really strong grounding principles for you as an individual. And at the end of the day, if you're uncomfortable in a situation, you've got to make that choice. Do you compromise yourself or do you walk away from it? And it may mean turning away a lot of business or even losing the job that you're in. But actually, at the end of the day, if you get to that decision, you shouldn't be in that job.
And Robert, leading on from that, I understand that you're a Christian. Have you found that being a Christian in the law environment or business environment in general has been something quite difficult for you?
No, because that plays into my own personal values, but I would never seek to impose that on anybody else in the workplace. But it does have an impact on my morals, but that doesn't mean to say that I have better morals than people sitting alongside me. It may align me with people with similar morals, perhaps not similar beliefs, but I think it's just, you all know where your line is. And you know, some people just want to make as much money as possible. There's nothing wrong in that. If they break the law, clearly there is. But there are some things I wouldn't do that they perhaps would do.
I've got an answer to your first question, Eleanor, around the compromising morals bit. In that I spent 17 years in the same company, like working my way up through that company. And the first 3 or 4 levels of the ladder, should we say, they were fairly easy, but the final rung was where I got into the boardroom. The final rung of my career ladder was where I got a directorship and where I, in my eyes, would have made it in my career. And the first 2 times that I applied for that role, I failed. I didn't get the role. And I probably would have got the role if I had compromised my morals and behaved differently and sort of thrown myself down a different path. And one of the things which always stood very, very clear in my mind was I knew I was going to get the role. I just didn't know when. I just didn't know at what year in my career I would be there. And I saw the people who got the role before me create certain behaviors in our colleagues. So they would walk into rooms and people would stop talking. They would walk into rooms and people would put their head down because these people were really senior. And I knew that when I got that job, I wanted to be the first person who got that job, who didn't make people stop talking, who didn't make people put their head down, because I wanted to bring the human side to that role. So I would say if there's any learning from that, it's, you know, only compromise yourself if the win is bigger than the feeling of being compromised. And to me, I could never have wanted anything more than, you know, than knowing that I did the right thing as a person. So I hope that answers it a little bit.
I was going to add something, Eleanor, to that. And I was just reflecting that actually very often, and I don't know if the other panelists will agree on this, is that whenever you've changed a job, if you've been in a job, like you were saying, Rachel, because there's some level of compromise, whether it's on a values basis or potential and morals basis, although in my experience, it's a values based. Again, it's actually there's a mismatch, or someone treats you in a way that it doesn't reflect what you think is right. And so I guess to answer your question, that whenever again in my experience I've felt that I was being compromised in some way, it's having the courage, and it really requires courage. And I was reflecting on when you were saying again, Rachel, at a senior level, I was in banking before, and it's a very different set of morals there, and having the courage at quite a senior level to go, you know, this isn't right, and I'm going to step out of that corporate world and follow what's right for me, when everyone else, my parents and just people around me going, why are you doing that? So if there was a lesson to share with any young people here today, it's to really understand yourself first and foremost, and then know the values of the culture in the company that you're going to work for. And if then you feel compromised at any point, have the courage to leave and keep being true to yourself, because that's the only thing you can have, right, is to keep being true to yourself.
I think, can well, you will, if you do that, and it can be really brave, or turn down potential work, clients or whatever, but you will be so much happier if you stay true to that. Sounds cliched. I'm now in a position where I have control over that to a degree. So I run a membership organisation, but it is invite only. You cannot join. So I pick and choose who I work with, or who I work with. And I would advise anybody with a company who have a service or a product, service especially, only work with people that are nice, that you like. Don't work with the shits, because it will bite you in the bum.
Just a quick reminder, John, we are supposed to be keeping this one PG-13, and we've hit the 2 swear words mark in the film ratings.
Oh dear.
What was swearing about that?
He doesn't even know he's doing it. Magical.
Can I just add that I think that if, again, it's just to pick up on what we're all saying here, is that if you find yourself being compromised, and if you're in that position where you're feeling uncomfortable about working with, you know, a job, a task, a client, a business, whatever it is that actually from a practical level, that takes away a huge amount of energy and thought, and again, referencing a situation that I was in where I was working with a client that made me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't enjoy that work, and it took a huge amount of thought process and decision to eventually leave this client. But then the doors that opened after that, because there's the space to allow that, the new opportunities in, was, you know, so much more worthwhile than staying with a client, because that felt like the safe thing to do.
And I think, just finishing on this one, that as you grow in your business skills and management leadership skills, if you're drawing those lines and people can see them externally, it makes it much easier to draw them internally, because you're not seen as a hypocrite. So when you have really difficult internal issues that you have to deal with, if you can, people have seen that you're not prepared to cross lines externally to get revenue in, they'll actually follow you when you make those internal decisions that are as tough as the external ones.
Eleanor, do you want to move on to your second question?
Yeah. Okay, so kind of leading on from the whole morality thing, have you guys found that in the workplace you've unfortunately had to cut off some friends, or possibly you've lost friends falling out over a competition / moral issue, and how have you dealt with losing
Eleanor, can you
friendships?
say the last bit of that again, because you lagged?
Which bit, sorry?
The last bit of the question.
Oh, I'll just say it again. Basically, how have you dealt with possibly losing friendships over moral / competition issues in the workplace? Or have you experienced that?
I don't think I've lost a friendship that I didn't want to lose. So I think the difference is intention. If you recognize that a friendship isn't serving you anymore, it isn't good for you anymore, then you can walk away from it. But I then don't see that as a loss. I see that as a choice.
Rachel Guyatt, what do you make of that?
I would say the same, actually, and would go back to my last point where, as I said, I had a tricky client and made a very deliberate decision to not work with that particular client anymore, and it was the right decision for me. So no, I haven't lost any friendships through business. I have chosen to not work with clients because it's not been the right thing for me.
I'm curious, John,
So
Rachel, that is a lot of echo.
Sorry, I was just going to be a bit controversial in that if you're in business, you don't have to be friends with everybody you're working with. And actually surrounding yourself with friends, if you're starting a business, might not be the best thing, because who's going to actually give you real constructive criticism and challenge if you're all very, very friendly and nobody wants to upset each other? So have I lost friends? No, but I've upset partners. You know, I managed a law firm where I had partners who are all equal, and I had to make decisions which would alienate and upset some of those partners, some who might never get back on board with my vision, and then that's a completely different ballpark. But don't assume if you're going into business that the best way to get a successful business is for you all to be mates and friends. And I think it was Alex Ferguson said when he was leading Man United, you know, I don't need to be friends with the players, I want to get the best out of the players.
Oh, following on from that, equally, some of the most successful teams, whether it be in sport or whatever, or an SAS unit, they're not necessarily friends. Actually, they don't all have to like each other off the field, but when they come to do their job, they're ruthlessly efficient and they all respect it. A lot of it has to be built on mutual respect. You don't have to like everybody, but you do. There does have to be respect, and the values have to be right to labour the point.
Can I add something to that as well? Again, on what we've just been talking about is, and bringing in the thread of it being a good team, is that actually in a good team, you do need to, the foundation is trust. So having that ability to trust everyone in your team, that allows you to generate conflict. And it's actually in conflict that new ideas are generated and we can move forward. If we're all agreeing to something, when somebody might not be agreeing, they're just sort of giving a lip service, then there's no authenticity. And that often happens in companies. I don't know if the rest of the panelists will have been in meetings where people are going, yes, yes, yeah, and they walk out and they moan about the person who was just doing the meeting because they didn't agree, but they didn't speak up because there wasn't an environment. The environment didn't allow for that conflict, if you like, to go, no, I don't agree with you. And potentially, if you think about your friends, if you've got really good friends, you will challenge them on things. And so in a team environment, you won't always be friends. And it's good to have that challenging environment, but all based on trusting each other.
I think a really underrated skill is the ability to give feedback. And you'll normally find that in a leadership program, you know, that suddenly if you become a people manager, that's when you learn how to give feedback. But everybody needs to know how to give feedback, whether it's feedback to your teacher, to your friends, to your parents. You know, feedback to everybody is really, really important, so that you take away the judgmental side of feedback, and you make sure that it always is seen that it comes from a good place of good intention with the right outcomes at heart. And then feedback becomes a really, really useful skill in business, in all areas of business.
I think we best move on to our next set of questions, but I think that's a good way to wrap that question up. Linus, on to you.
All right, thanks for giving all the answers just now. I think a lot of the answers you gave kind of tied into what I wanted to talk about. So I'll be asking a few questions on interview. So we talked a lot about starting a business and entrepreneurship, but what I really want to focus on right now is for the people who are just moving into the professional world. So not exactly starting a business, but working for someone. So my first question actually goes out to Isabel, and the rest can jump in afterwards, is that you've gone to a lot of interviews before, you've done different jobs. I've seen your CV, it's a long list of companies there. Have you ever gone to an interview where you felt uncomfortable? And mostly the second part of this question will be, what are the red flags, you know, when you're being interviewed that, you know, this company might be a bit shady, I don't really want to work for this company? Because I know I have experienced this, so I'm just curious as to what are your thoughts on this, and if you have any examples.
Okay, so the first question was I uncomfortable in any interview? In any interview. Actually, ironically, the only interview I was ever uncomfortable was actually when I was interviewing for anyone who went to Sussex University, and I was going to do triple science, and they sat me down on a chair and said, "You're a woman doing science, why should we educate you?" I gave them my opinion and walked out. And I was very, and I was uncomfortable, but I was very authentic in that, and I shared what I felt, and I was offered a very low offer. I didn't go there in the end because I realized that their values were not matching to mine. So I've actually never, other than that interview, never had an uncomfortable interview. What was the second part of your question?
So you kind of answered the second part, which is about the red flags for an interview. So you talked about values. So can you elaborate more on what kind of values are you looking for in a company, just from your personal experience?
Again, it's been interesting. This has been coming through as a theme. Again, it starts with understanding what's important to you. So what are your drivers? So, and then being in a company, asking questions that can help you identify whether the way that they behave, the way that they operate, the way that that company does things is how you want to work. So for example, if you're a very collaborative person and you like to work in a team, maybe going into the high finance where it's very individually orientated as a value or a way of behaving might not suit you. So if you knew that to begin with, you might be uncomfortable going into that kind of environment. So it's really, it always starts with looking at yourself and understanding yourself, so that when you go into interview, you can then also interview the interviewer, if you like, because it's a two-way process. It's actually assessing, are you a good fit for this company? Because the companies that really succeed are looking for people that have the same values, and they'll ask you questions. But in the same way, you need to ask questions to make sure that again, I'm using the word culture, which is a bit of a broad framework, but that company, you can feel it's the kind of company that you want to work for. And I would say just one last thing on this is that actually, if you get through to the second interview, we get a chance to go further in a company, ask to walk around the company, or ask, can I shadow someone in the company? Because actually, if you spend an hour or two or half a day or a day in the company, you'll get a better feel. And it is about a feeling. Is this the right feel for me? Does it feel right to me? And it's about trusting yourself in that regard.
Right, that's interesting. I'm just curious if there's anyone who wants to add, because it sounds like there's a lot of trust and feeling. Robert?
Yeah, I think again, I'm just sort of reflecting back to when I qualified as a lawyer, and all that we've said about values is absolutely key, but we're sort of making values very black and white when actually they're very grey. And I wanted to go and work in London because I wanted London experience, and actually I ended up working in Hong Kong and Sydney on the back of that. Would I have ever thought I would always work in London? No, because I didn't like that lifestyle of the pressure of, having to work ridiculous hours. So yes, it was a grey value for me because I wanted a lifestyle, I wanted friendships outside of work, but I also wanted that experience. So I think it's not black and white when you're looking at starting out. You will feel a line, a bit like Isabel being told, why on earth would we educate women in science? That's a line you just don't cross over, but there's a lot of grey. And if you want to get experience, you may have to go to an organisation where the grey is slightly darker than would be ideal for you.
All right, interesting.
I think that's what I would describe as a calculated compromise.
Wow.
But it may be that you want that firm on your CV, so you bite the bullet and just suck it up for 6 months, a year. But that's calculated, but it's your choice. Yeah.
I think there's an expectation from interviewees that the interviewer is highly capable, and often the interviewer is not. and they go into interviews badly prepared, and they really just want the outcome, which is to hire somebody new that's going to do well in their firm. And many managers, me included, have rocked into interviews without reading CVs properly, without preparing properly. And it's a bit embarrassing, but as a skilled person, you get to wing it. But from an interview point of view, there's only really 2 interviews in my mind that really ever stick out. And that was the one before I worked in my 17-year career in one company, and the one directly after. And they are starkly different. The one before, I was interviewed the first time and then got told to go and speak to somebody else in that company to sort of have a second check whether I was good enough. And then that person put me onto a third person. In that third interview, where I thought this is make or break, they're either going to give me the job or they're not, that third person said to me, I can see why they were undecided about you. I think I'm going to relate that to my colleague. And I stood up and I said, please don't do that, because I've made the decision for you. I don't want to work here. I don't want to work in a business that can't make a decision. And so I walked out of that thinking, I just learned something there. I wasted a lot of hours, but I learned something. And then the interview after I came out of that 17-year career, starkly different in that the minute I walked in the room, literally the minute I shook their hand, I knew I had the job. I knew that I looked and sounded like the person that they thought was right. And the way they looked at me, I knew it wouldn't matter what happened in the next hour, I was going to get the job. I just knew it in my heart of hearts. And that interviewer had set me the challenge of giving a presentation. So I was ready to deliver a presentation. I was rehearsed, I was really like ready to go. They'd even forgotten that they'd asked me to do it. So it got like half an hour into the interview and there was no mention of a presentation, but they offered me the job there and then. So interviews are definitely a grey area. They are so different in the way to expect them. And so I would always say, best thing, expect the unexpected.
That's good.
Okay,
I'm very conscious of time. What we might have to do, because we only have 21 minutes left, is rather than going through both questions that we had planned for our following topics, just go through one each and see what time we have at the end of that. Yeah?
Sure.
You're the boss.
All right. Oh God, that's scary. Linus, did you have any kind of follow-up to that second question at all?
Yes, actually, but if it's not too much time, we can go to yours first.
No, let's go with yours.
All right. So just to sum up, it sounds like, Robert, you mentioned about prioritizing your values, because a lot of them it's either you want A or you want B. You can't have the whole cake and eat it as well. So it needs to be there's a bit of priority. And as for what Rachel actually mentioned, I think if anyone out there is a bit afraid of being interviewed, which I am, you just know that the interviewers are also humans and they also don't prepare. So you can actually wing it if you want to. So, okay, I just wanted to follow up on a bit of the gray area side. So now moving on to, as someone being interviewed, I know one of the key things that we discussed earlier is morals and values. And the one thing I want to touch about is lying on your CV, or in essence, lying to get the job. So what are your thoughts on lying to get the job? And this is for everybody. Anyone can just jump in, because I know some of us, at least,
Don't do it. No.
Do it. Don't do it.
You'll be found out.
Yeah.
Found out. Okay. And anyone has anything to elaborate on that? Because I've heard differing arguments on how sometimes a bit of white lie to polish up your CV is true. So I'm not sure what is the extent of the white lie. So if anyone has any feedback on that, or just no go.
Rachel, you seem to have Rachel Gaia.
For me, honesty, again, we keep coming back to values. For me, it's honesty, truth, communication. You will be found out if you say you're skilled in something, if you say you've had experience in something, get to day 2 of the job and they ask you to do that skill and you haven't got it, you've got a problem. So for me, it really is about walking into an interview and saying, I'm really keen to know how to do that. I have a little bit of experience in it, but I'm really willing to learn. And that will get you, that for me would get you much further than saying, of course I can do it, and blagging your way through it. It's a no for me.
Yeah, and I think picking up on that, Rachel, it's actually in the interview itself, Linus, when somebody says, have you done this or done that? Be completely open and honest, because if we're interviewing, you are never going to find the 100% perfect character. You will get somebody who has real skills that you want, and you've got to develop them in other areas. And having somebody who says, look, I'm not so good in that area, but I really want to learn, is a big tick.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I think don't be afraid to challenge. Don't be afraid to challenge the interviewer, because sometimes interviewers ask terrible questions. I had an interviewer say to me right before they offered me the job, the CEO said, see, that my big concern with you, Rachel, is you've never actually sold this product before. And so, I'm just not sure. And I was able to say, I appreciate that. However, it's not about the product, because you're going to train me in the product. It's about my approach to your customers. It's about my sales process. It's about blah, 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 a long list of things. And he went, okay, fine. Do you want the job? So, but if I hadn't challenged him, I don't know if it would have been the same outcome.
Rachel, leading on from that, someone in the chat has asked, how do you really believe in yourself? It sounds like with your interview experience, you've got a lot of self-belief, but how did that come about?
God, that's a good question. I was always brought up with the phrase, Rachel, if you walk into a room and people don't notice that you're in it, go out and walk in again. Just have a presence. Just know that you've got strengths. But the problem is you can't know that you've got strengths unless you've got them. So I guess you've got to be able to self-reflect and be true to yourself. So if I self-reflect on a situation that I did really badly at, then that self-belief wouldn't be there. So you need to be able to recognize and reward yourself for your own success, but also reflect and recognize where you could have done better, and then do the things that would make you better. It's pointless coming out of a situation and saying, oh, I did really badly, and I just hope it goes better next time, because hope is not good enough. You need to put the work in to understand and get the skill, and then you know you can be good next time.
Can we go to Isabel and then to Rachel?
Oh my goodness, what a great question. And I was thinking about, I mean, obviously.
Actually, hang on. I think they clarified the context of that question.
Okay,
so you said, yeah, in the context, the person who asked said he meant it in the context of business ideas and being an entrepreneur. Haha.
As in, how do you believe in your business ideas?
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I would say that it's having a vision. It starts with having a vision, actually, and understanding what you're trying to create, and just having the courage to believe in what you feel is your purpose, if you like. And again, understanding yourself starts with understanding yourself.
I think also it's, if you're starting as an entrepreneur and you've got a vision and an idea, having somebody who you absolutely trust, who you can bounce that around, who's got no axe to grind, they've got no financial input into the business, but is happy to say, yeah, this is a good idea, or this has legs, or this is a terrible idea, is so key, Linus. You've got to surround yourself with those sort of people who you can just sit down with a cup of coffee and say, I've got this mad idea. What do you think about it? Now, you don't have to always accept what they say, but having that forum just to chat about it will allow you to process, and you kind of think, well, actually, I still passionately believe that this is a good idea, and I've actually kicked it around with somebody I really trust and respect, and even though they think there's got some issues and problems, I'm still going to go for it.
Rachel, do you still want to add your bit on?
I was going to say, and to take that a step further, I think it's to have someone like a mentor, a coach, someone that you can work with continuously, to always have, as I said previously, to have somebody there to, you know, to run your ideas past, to back you up if that's what's needed, to challenge you if that's what's needed. And I think there's another side to it as well, is that understanding that, you know, when you, all the way throughout your careers, there will be fears and there will be confidence issues that crop up, and it's not just you. Everybody has fears, bits that they're not so good at, and it's about being able to talk about that and talk to somebody and get help with that, but also understand that everybody has that. So whether it's Isabel, Robert, myself, any of us here, we all have those fears in different areas and in different ways.
We're going to have to move on because we're running very short on time. It's back to my question. I'm having to pick between two. Let's go with this one. It's a bit more rapid fire, hopefully. So, and this is for everyone. I want a quick answer from each of you, rapid fire.
Fingers on the buzzers.
So, fingers on the buzzers. So things in business go wrong, often and sometimes terribly. You've all experienced some colossal screw-ups, I'm sure. And I think it's important that we normalize that as an idea, that people are going to mess up. If you wouldn't mind, please, each of you sharing what you believe might be your worst screw-up and how you dealt with it.
Oh, I'll start. My husband and I decided that we were going to go into business with somebody, with another person, and I didn't trust that other person, and we went with it for a while, and then eventually it imploded. And I should have listened to my gut instinct. My gut was right. I knew that it was the wrong thing to do, and it imploded. There we go. Trust your gut.
Trust your gut. Robert.
Yeah, so we introduced our employee ownership, where all the members of staff get an equal share of the profits. Fantastic, massive bounce in goodwill, and the culture productivity. When we came to start talking about the profit share before the end of the financial year, we got the comms completely wrong, completely mixed messages. People didn't understand it. It was far too complicated. And it actually, for a period, we managed to get it back, but it had a real negative impact on the whole employee ownership. This is our firm. We're all striving for the same goal. Had a real impact, but we managed to get it around. So we should have done much better planning on the comms. And in fact, what we should have done is asked the people we were going to be communicating with, i.e. all the staff, how best would they like this communicated.
Okay. Isabel?
I was just thinking there's a lot, lots and lots and lots, right? However, the one that I think as a lesson slightly different from all these is that I was in banking, and I was a director in a bank, investment bank, and I stood up and said, this is what I think, to the managing director, and I was deemed to be not political. I was not a political player, so I got promoted over. That was a big impact on my career. But I would say the learning out of that was I left because I realised actually I spoke up. It was not deemed to be the right thing. I ended up being made redundant essentially, and my whole life has come out of that. I ended up following my dreams, living in the ski resort, and I'm saying that because we are often fearful about our mess up, what we mess up in life, if you like. But actually, they're our biggest learning and the biggest chance to redirect our life. So I'm a big embrace your learning, encourage it, and if you're not failing, you're not learning.
It's a good mindset, John.
Yeah, it was when I was an employee rather than what I do now. Is I had a falling out with the board, in particular with one person on the board who was a bully and wasn't particularly pleasant to anybody in the company. But I was young, much younger, and I just embraced it head on, and asked him what he did with his time in the daylight hours, given that I was paying his salary because I was in sales and generating revenue. But again, I walked away from that company not long after I was headhunted away. But would I do that again now? I hope I would, actually, because it was a values thing. I called it.
That doesn't sound much like a screw up, though, John. That sounds like a good decision on principle.
Oh, right, screw ups. More recently, when I first started Sampa, with hindsight, I let in people to the membership because I needed to build it. And with hindsight, if they applied now, would I let them in? No. So I compromised at the beginning.
Okay.
But we're keeping it clean because it's,
Yes, mine is I hired somebody last year who I should have, within about 2 weeks of hiring her, I knew she wasn't right, and I didn't follow my instinct, and I let her stay in the job for a while. And even worse than that, she looked after some of our biggest clients, and they were clients that I didn't have a personal relationship with. So when the inevitable happened, I had to work really hard to win back the relationship and to make sure that I came out without any damage to the business, which luckily I didn't. But it could have been very different. I'm lucky that she was actually quite a grown-up in her mindset. She was professional, should I say. She didn't want to slander me or the outcome or the situation. She dealt with it well. So, but yeah, I should have listened to my gut.
That's 2 listening to guts. Lessons learned.
Yeah.
Listen to the gut.
Yeah. Always trust your gut.
Eleanor, on to your final question.
Okay, so obviously in the news, there's been a lot at the moment about the Black Lives Matter movement, and there's obviously a disparity between the treatment of Black and white people, unfortunately. And are you guys aware of your white privilege in the workplace, and have you experienced racism?
Ooh, big questions are finished.
Oh man.
Again, so I obviously white, no, not racism. I would say as a woman, definitely, as I explained, as a science, and also in banking as well. I was basically promoted over, and it was a sex discrimination thing. So I think that to answer your first question, I definitely know how privileged we all are. We're living in the first world and have lovely lives, thankfully. I think it's important to be mindful again, if you're running your own company, to make sure diversity and inclusion is part of any kind of policy that you have. It just adds to the whole mix of how different thinking, which is very important, to think differently.
Sorry, I meant to say witness racism, by the way, not experienced.
Okay.
In my background, I spent most of my time in like cities that weren't local to where we live now. So I spent a lot of time in London and Manchester, where diversity inclusion was you know, more readily introduced into businesses, whereas I think maybe in some areas it's probably a little further behind. But like Isabel said, I think the only sort of discrimination that I could say I've ever been, you know, a witness of, or, you know, feeling like, is the male female thing. You know, I worked in a very male dominated sector, automotive, and it's full of men, and it's still full of men. And if you're a woman, you have to work incredibly hard to climb the ranks of any business in that sector, because it is so male dominated. So a different kind of discrimination, but still very real when you're within it.
Yes, I'm fully aware of my white privilege, and I've had the fortune to visit Africa quite a few times with a charity that I was involved in on the board. Have I seen racism? Yes. Have I stood up to it? I hope so, occasionally. But it was interesting. I actually just responded to a LinkedIn post just before this started, and the question was, are you anti-racist or non-racist? And I replied, having watched the video, that I hope I'm anti-racist, but I've still got a lot to learn.
Good answers. Good answers. All right, Linus, on to your final question.
Right. So my final question is quite simple. Just is again for everybody. So given that the job market is set to, you know, it's probably not going to be very well in the near future because of the recession that's coming up. I'm just curious as to what kind of skills would you do you think are important for the students that are listening? What kind of skills do you think are, you know, we've talked about culture and values, but what about the hard skills? What are the skills that you think you should really understand and try to master it when you go to work, that will help you in the future?
I'm going to nominate John to answer this, because he knows what the skills are that I think we would all say.
The soft skill, for me, it's all about your network. If you learn to network effectively, and if you can build a network, a good network, and it will take time, but invest your time building a network, that will look after you for life, regardless of what job you have or whether you set up a business. Because everything you need, and this isn't just for business, this is for life, everything you need should be in your network, from a plumber, a carpenter, to your finance, to your sales, to people like Rachel, your outsourced admin. Everything should be there. And I can't tell you how much that will change your life.
Yeah, I think people.
End of rant. Sorry.
Yeah. I think to add to that, I mean, I'm a big advocate for the people skills, but at the age that I believe a lot of our audience are, I would say right now, any skills. Just get into a company, roll your sleeves up and get stuck in. Because even if, you know, it's not a job where you're paid, it's maybe work experience, it doesn't matter. I think there are lots of people around that you can learn from continually. And so I would say any skills right now that are out of a university classroom are going to be good skills and experience for you to get to grips with.
And my addition to that would be that any digital skills that you can get your hands on at the moment, so if that's digital marketing, that's sales funnels, that's you know, all of that sort of thing, anything digital, if you can do that, then you'll go far with digital skills at the moment. It's an obvious answer.
The other thing I would say is I would class business skills, and for that is learn how to read a balance sheet and a cash flow forecast. Go on, just pull accounts of Companies House, any company, and just read them, and do you understand them? Look at a cash flow, because you will need to understand the basic principles of business. Even if you're setting up on your own or you're becoming a lawyer in a law firm, we are going to be so much more focused on those basic nuts and bolts of how a business actually runs, and what are the key levers that make a business successful or make it fail.
Definitely. Is there any other skills, or can we just wrap this part up? So
I think we should probably wrap up because we've got 1 minute left to go on the clock, and we still need to hear from Isabel about the future of the Young Biz Academy and other things.
We do. There was again. I hope this has been of value to the participants, and I wanted to thank everybody, certainly you youngsters, if you like, for asking some very interesting questions. And I'm just sorry we haven't got more time to ask the questions because I don't know about the other panelists, but it's been very interesting thinking about the answers, sharing some of our responses to you. And I really hope that not just for you guys, but for the audience listening, the attendees, that it's been of use to you. The purpose of this session was really to get your feedback, though, because we the elders, if you like, the old fogies, whatever you want to call us, would like to create a program designed for young people, which will address some of the issues that have come up. And some of the themes that have been coming up today have been really about understanding yourself, understanding your values, knowing how to be yourself, and also seeking help, finding sort of a mentor or coaching that might be able to support you. And those are some of the elements that we'd like to put in a program that we would like to launch in the autumn. But it has to be designed with you in mind. We don't want to put it out there that this is what we think you need. So to that end, we would like to invite everyone on this this webinar to complete a survey for us, and also, because we've made a recording, to share this with as many people as you want, any young people, because the more feedback we get, the more we can create this really great program for you. We are offering an incentive for you to fill the survey, because I know it's something you have to do afterwards. And that is, as John mentioned earlier, one of the key things to getting ahead is to have a really strong network. And John runs an amazing networking group and knows pretty much everybody in the Southwest. So if you would like to tap into that, we're offering, John's very kindly offered some time. So we're going to pick somebody out, we'll do a prize award somebody with who fills the survey in with the chance to have lunch with John, either virtually or in the Southwest, depending on where you're located. So a really amazing prize up there. So please do fill in the survey, because we want to make this for you. So I think that's kind of wrapping everything up. If I've forgotten anything, please interject now, anybody. But again, just wanted to say thank you very much for everyone just taking the time out today, and hope it's been of use.
Please make sure to add all of the panelists on LinkedIn. I'm sure they're more than happy to answer any more questions that you guys have. Yeah, hope you've enjoyed it, and we will see you on the next one.
I've really enjoyed being grilled. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it too.
I've hated every minute of it.
Cool. Well, I put a note in to say, like, please do connect with us on LinkedIn, because, you know, if nothing else, you need to start really building your network, and we're a great place to start.
Oh, perhaps we should have put our LinkedIn profiles in the chat earlier so that they could have just connected it.
We can send them out in the in a follow-up email, can't we?
I guess one last thing is, hopefully, I mean, you know, we've launched this program that we might be able to meet you in person in the autumn. And really, again, our motivation is to share our experience and skills and give back into the community. So if we can help, we would like to be able to do that.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you very much, everybody.